All right, so living below your means, huh? Sounds kind of, I don't know, restrictive,
Yeah.
but actually, stuff we're looking at today, it's pretty fascinating. It's not just about pinching pennies. It's like this whole philosophy, you know?
Yeah. And this source we're diving into, it jumps right into making a podcast about it.
Oh, interesting. Like, hey everyone, let's talk about living simply while, hustling to build a podcast empire.
Exactly. Kind of ironic, right?
A little bit. But hey, maybe that's part of the deep dive too, right? Figuring out if they're genuine or just, I don't know, chasing clout or whatever.
Totally. But putting that aside for a sec, the way they lay out the podcast structure is actually pretty smart.
Yeah, it's like intro to living below your means, then psychology of spending. It's like a whole course almost.
And that psychology part, that's where it gets really interesting. They even suggest an episode called Unmasking Your Spending Triggers.
Ooh, I like that. Catchy. It's like, why do we buy things we don't need?
Right. Like, is it keeping up with the Joneses? Social media pressure.
Oh, totally. I'm guilty of that for sure. Seeing those influencers with their fancy stuff.
And it's not just the big purchases, it's those little things too.
Oh, absolutely. Like that daily latte.
Well,
Or those subscription boxes you forget you even signed up for.
exactly. But this source, they get into the big picture too, things like sunk cost fallacy.
Sunk cost. Remind me what that is again?
It's like when you keep putting money into something, even when it's clearly not working.
Oh, right, right. Like a car that keeps breaking down.
Yep. Or a relationship that's, well,
Oof, yeah. Okay, moving on. But that's what I like about this source. It's not just about cutting coupons, it's about understanding ourselves.
absolutely. And once you get that, then you can move on to the practical stuff like budgeting.
Yeah, they have a section on that too. Cutting costs without cutting corners, I think they called it.
Betty, right.
Yeah. Makes it sound less, I don't know, depriving.
Exactly. It's about being smart, not miserable.
So, what kind of stuff do they suggest?
Well, for one, they say you got to track your spending. Like really know where your money goes.
Ugh, spreadsheets.
Not necessarily. There are apps for that now.
Oh, okay. That makes it a little less scary.
Right. And they talk about finding joy in frugal living too.
Like becoming a minimalist?
Not necessarily. More like finding free activities you enjoy or learning to cook at home.
Oh, yeah. I actually love cooking. Saves money and it's fun.
Exactly. See,
Yeah.
it's about shifting your mindset.
Totally. And speaking of shifting, they also get into saving and investing. Big jump, but it makes sense.
Totally. Like, okay, you've mastered your spending. Now let's build for the future.
Yeah, and they even mention this whole FIRE movement thing.
Financial independence, retire early.
Yeah, that's the one. I mean, retiring early sounds pretty good.
Who wouldn't want that? But it's not just about retiring early. It's about having options.
Oh, absolutely. Like the freedom to choose what you want to do, not be stuck in a job you hate.
Exactly. And this source, they even have a suggested episode on investing, trying to make it less intimidating, I guess.
Yeah, investing demystified or something like that. They talk about index funds and stuff. Pretty basic, but still
Hey, sometimes the basics are what people need.
true enough. But what I really liked was their emphasis on the long game.
Oh, yeah, they talk about how living below your means isn't just about today, it's about building a solid foundation.
Right. It's like, yeah, maybe you can't buy that fancy new gadget now, but
Mm.
in the long run, you'll be way better off.
Exactly. It's about delayed gratification, building financial security, peace of mind, all that good stuff.
Totally. And it's funny because now they jump into advice on actually making this podcast.
Yeah, it's like, okay, here's what we talk about, and here's how you'd actually do it. Almost a meta deep dive.
Yeah, exactly. It's like now that you know how to live below your means, go tell everyone else.
Yeah.
But you know what? Some of their advice is actually pretty good.
Oh, yeah. What caught your eye?
Well, they talked a lot about storytelling, which I thought was interesting. It's like, yeah, you can give people facts and figures, but
But will they remember it?
Mm.
That's where a good story comes in.
exactly. It's like, make it relatable,
Hmm.
help people connect with the ideas.
Make them feel something.
Right,
That's how you make a message stick.
right. And they also talked about keeping things positive, like encouraging, not judgmental.
Yeah, because let's be honest, money stuff can be pretty stressful.
Mm.
Who needs another lecture about how they're messing up?
Totally. And then this is where it gets really tactical. They have all these ideas for promoting the podcast.
Oh, yeah. Like what?
Social media stuff, doing guest spots on other shows, even starting an email list.
Not bad, actually. Social media especially, that's where everyone is these days.
Right. And they had this idea, I thought it was pretty clever, like sharing key takeaways and quotes on social media.
Oh, I see, like bite-sized wisdom to get people hooked.
Yeah, exactly. Like, want to learn how to retire early? Click here.
Uh-huh. Subtle, but hey, it probably works.
Right. And the guest appearances, that's good for cross promotion, reaching new audiences.
Makes sense. Find people who are already interested in personal finance, tap into their network.
Exactly. And then the email list, I'm not sure everyone does those anymore, but
Some people swear by them. It's a way to build a more dedicated following, I guess.
yeah, like people who are really serious about the topic, they'll sign up to get those extra insights.
And you can share things that are maybe too long for social media or just more in depth.
Right, right. So overall, I was pretty impressed with their podcasting advice.
Yeah, it shows they've thought this through. They're not just armchair experts. They've actually considered the execution, too.
Totally. And I think that's a good sign, right? Shows they're serious about actually making a difference.
It does. But there was one thing missing from all this.
Oh, what's that?
They talked about the psychology of spending, but not really the emotional side of money.
I see what you mean. Like the deeper stuff.
Exactly. The fear, the guilt, the shame that can sometimes come up around money.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's a whole other layer, isn't it?
It is. And it's often rooted in our upbringing, our past experiences.
Right. Like if your parents were always stressed about money, you might carry that with you.
Exactly. Or if you made a big financial mistake in the past, it can really affect your confidence.
Totally. I've been there. It takes a while to get over that.
It does. And I think that's something a lot of people struggle with, but it's not talked about enough.
You're right. It's like this taboo topic, but it's so important.
It is. And imagine a podcast episode that actually delves into that.
Yeah.
It could be really powerful.
Oh, absolutely. Something like money and your emotions or,
Healing your financial trauma.
ooh, that's good. Gets right to the heart of it.
Right. Because sometimes it's not just about budgets and spreadsheets. It's about dealing with those deeper issues.
Totally. And then I don't know if we want to touch on this, but
Why?
this whole focus on creating a podcast, it's a little, I don't know.
Self-serving.
Yeah, a little. Like, are they really passionate about living below your means or just about being a podcast star?
It's a valid question. It's easy to get caught up in the whole influencer thing these days.
Right. Like, look at me, I'm helping people. But are you really?
Exactly. So I guess it comes down to intention, doesn't it?
It does. And I hope our listeners can sense that our intention here is genuine.
I think they can.
Yeah.
We're not trying to sell anything. We're just having a conversation, exploring these ideas together.
Right. And hopefully giving people some food for thought.
Exactly. And speaking of food for thought, this source did have some good advice on goal setting, too.
Oh, yeah, they did. Like, once you've dealt with the mental and emotional stuff, then you can actually start making a plan.
Right, because what's the point of living below your means if you don't know what you're working towards?
Totally. It's like, what are your goals? What do you want to achieve?
Do you want to pay off debt? Buy a house? Travel the world?
Right. Figure out your why.
Exactly. And then you can start breaking down those big goals into smaller, more manageable steps.
Right. And then it's just a matter of taking action one step at a time.
But that's where a lot of people get stuck, isn't it?
It is. Taking that first step can be scary.
It can. But it's also incredibly empowering. And that's where a good call to action can make all the difference.
Oh, right. Like that final push, that nudge to get people moving. What do they suggest for that? Yeah, like, okay, you've listened to all this, now what?
Exactly. And this source, they're all about those baby steps, you know.
Oh, good, because sometimes those big financial goals can feel, I don't know, impossible.
Right. So they suggest things like just track your spending for a week.
Okay, that's doable. I can do that.
See? Easy. Or find one unnecessary expense to cut.
Like that gym membership I never used.
Exactly. Or maybe those 5 streaming services you're subscribed to.
Oh, ouch, you got me there. But I do use them sometimes.
Sure. But maybe you could cut back to just 1 or 2.
Good point. It's all about being more mindful.
Right. Exactly. And then, this is where it gets interesting, they suggest going a little deeper.
Oh, how so?
They say, ask yourself why you want to live below your means.
Like, what's the ultimate goal?
Exactly. Is it financial freedom? Early retirement? Just less stress?
Right, because if you don't know why you're doing it, it's harder to stay motivated.
Totally. It's like,
Right.
what's the point of saving money if you don't know what you're saving for?
Yeah, that's true. It's got to be tied to something meaningful.
Right. So figure out your why, and then they say the how will become much clearer.
I like that. It's like the motivation comes first, then the action follows.
Exactly. And then, well, that's pretty much it as far as this source goes.
Huh. Kind of ends abruptly, doesn't it?
It does. But maybe that's the point. It's like they've given us all this information. Now it's up to us to do something with it.
Yeah, I guess so. So what do you think? What's the one big takeaway from all this?
Hmm. That's a tough one. I think for me, it's about realizing that living below your means isn't about deprivation.
Right. It's not about being cheap or miserable.
Exactly. It's about making conscious choices, aligning your spending with your values, and ultimately creating a life you love.
A life that's richer in the things that truly matter.
Exactly.
Hmm.
And that's something we can all strive for, no matter our income level or financial situation.
Well said. And on that note, thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll be back next time with another fascinating exploration of, well, who knows what.
Until then, keep asking questions, keep learning, and keep